Hi, I'm Roxanne Richardson, and this is the Casual Friday podcast. In this last Casual Friday podcast of 2024, I have tidbits. I have a finished sweater project. I have an update on my loose ends project, and I have a few fun updates regarding sheep fleeces and what my plans are for those. So let's get started. This first tidbit is about the Knitting History Forum. This is an online Zoom event that occurs every year. I think in the past it was always in person, but since COVID, they have hosted it online so people around the world can access it. In the past, they have recorded each of the sessions and made those available indefinitely to ticket holders. I don't see anything about that this year, but that doesn't mean that won't be true as well. The cost is £27, and it will be on Saturday, February 1st, starting at 11:20 GMT and ending at 4:45. So if you're in another time zone, you might have to get up extra early. I will do my best to find out if it is going to be recorded, but at the time I was recording this video, I didn't have that information. I will leave a link down in the show notes to the Knitting History Forum website, and from there you can get the link to purchase tickets. You can see what the program is about too, just briefly. There are, I think, 6 topics. The first one is going to be knitting history in China from the late 19th century to the early 20th century. This will be presented by a PhD candidate in Hong Kong. The next one is the proof of the pattern is in the making, the technology of the crochet pattern in the 1840s, and how I got on when I tried to use them. The third program is called Knit Well, examining the use of a knitter's vocabulary in capturing emotional states. Then we get reconstructing the Bally Bunyan knitted cap, providing a glimpse into the experiences, skills, and time required in the knitting of 16th century knitted caps, utilizing experimental archaeology. This will be presented by an archaeologist. Then we have Bohu Sticknin, a network of creativity, and this will be presented by somebody from Sweden. And then the final program refers to the green sweater that you can see on the screen here. It's called Christina Chiger, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. The Girl in the Green Sweater. So this green sweater is currently on display in the U.S. Holocaust Museum. So again, information about getting tickets to this annual event are down in the show notes. This next tidbit came to me from Babs Fisher on Ravelry, and it's a YouTube video called Garment Autopsy. And the description of the video on YouTube goes like this. In October of 2022, at the Tudor Tailors Missing Persons Conference, Jane and Nina asked Susan North to perform a live autopsy on a mystery garment, having never seen it before, to demonstrate her methodology for interrogating and identifying dress. It was fascinating to watch Susan go through the meticulous process of examining the garment before sharing her findings, which luckily aligned with the Tudor tailors. The item of interest is the only known surviving example of an early modern farthingale sleeve. So the Tudor tailor and the women Jane and Nina that are being referred to are the 2 women who have written a series of books. This one is the one that I have called The Typical Tudor. It's the book that I used when I was starting my stocking project, where I wanted to try knitting stockings from different time periods. And one of the ones I did was a Tudor stocking using those construction methods. But they've written a number of other books as well. So these are 2 women who are fairly expert in the Tudor era, and they had come across this farthingale that there's no other example of it. And so they had Susan North examine it. The first, not quite half of the video, she is explaining and presenting to the court, because this is all done in a courtroom. There's a judge and there's a jury and everything. But she's explaining why there are so few old textiles in existence right now. And A lot of it is things I knew, but she went into a lot of detail about sort of the life cycle of textiles prior to the 19th century. So I highly recommend the video. I will leave a link down in the show notes. This tidbit is just a head up to my international viewers. I know there are a number of people in Europe for whom English is their second language. YouTube has started rolling out automatic dubbing, and that is available in 5 languages: French, Spanish, German, Italian, and Brazilian Portuguese. There's also 3 Asian languages that are in the experimental phase, but those are not available on my channel. I think it's Hindi, Japanese, and Indonesian, Malaysian? I can't remember, but regardless, those aren't available on my channel. Those are experimental because they're probably not very reliable. So this automatic dubbing is automatically created with new videos. It doesn't apply to videos that are already on my channel from before. I think the past couple of videos I've done have this automatic dubbing. If you want to switch it on or off to see what it's like, you can click on the settings icon. It looks like a little gear. If you're on a computer, it's in the bottom of the playback screen. If you're on the YouTube app, which is what you would be using on a mobile device like a phone or a tablet, it's probably going to be on the up. So you just tap on the screen and then you'll see the little icons, and then you can go in and turn the dubbing on or off or switch it to whatever language. I have no idea how good it is. The closed captions that you see on my channel are also automatically created. I don't have anything to do with them. Some channels do actually do subtitles manually so that they're really accurate, and because I'm a one-woman show, I just am not able to do that. But some people do rely on those closed captions. But now listen to the dubbing and maybe get more out of it. I'd be curious to know how good it is for those of you who speak more than one language. Maybe you can tell me if things are being translated correctly. But I thought I'd let you know. This final tidbit is about Finish It February. I know it's the end of December and February seems like it's a long way away. This is Finish It February is something I have been doing on my channel since the first year of Casual Friday back in 2018. So we're finishing our 7th year. So this will be the 8th time that I do Finish It February. Finish It February is an opportunity to pull out all of your UFOs, your unfinished objects, and just reacquaint yourself with them. Decide and make some decisions about them. Is this, because a lot of times you put things to the side and you forget that they even exist. So you pull them out and you're like, do I still like this? Do I have interest in finishing this? And if so, it goes in the yay pile. You might decide that you hate it, you never want to see it again, and that will go into the nay pile. That means you are done with this project. You are literally finished with it. Even if it is not finished, you are finished with it. And then you will have things that you have ambiguous feelings about. And I call that the pile of ambiguity. The beauty of doing this every single year is that over time, things that are in that pile of ambiguity become less ambiguous to you. You either have a change of heart and you decide, you know, I really do want to finish this and then I'm going to donate it or something, or give it away. Or you decide, I am never going to want to wear this. I never want to knit anymore on it. I hate the yarn. And you can just throw it away. If you don't feel good about throwing it away, you can donate it to Goodwill or a charity shop, whatever makes sense to you. I found that the things in the pile of ambiguity, when I pull them out every year, I just, after about 3 or 4 or 5 times of doing this, I'm like, you know what? I'm sick of seeing this. I have not gotten any more enthusiasm for it over the years. I get real, I'm not going to finish this. But the main goal is that you just pull these out and you address them, and in the month of February, you work on them. A lot of times, there's absolutely no way you're going to be able to finish every single one of those. The first time I pulled out all of my UFOs, there were 44 of them. And I spent that year finishing as many of them as I could. And I actually had a lot of fun with it. It wasn't a chore. The point is not to punish yourself and do some kind of penance. The point is to reacquaint yourself. And a lot of times if you've forgotten something like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. I really like that sweater. I don't even know why I put it to the side. Or, oh, I love this pattern. I love this sock yarn, but they didn't work together. So I'm going to rip it out and then I can use the sock yarn for a different pattern and find a different yarn for that sock pattern. So a lot of times it's just dealing with that impulse that you had a long time ago to just stuff it somewhere because you realized things weren't working out. That first year where I spent a year addressing that, that was back in, I think, 2016. And starting in 2018, I decided to devote the month of February to finishing things. So this is a great thing for me every year. A lot of times there's something I'm working on in the summer that I get fed up with, or something catastrophic happens in the project and I just can't deal with it. And so I put it away knowing that I'm going to come back to it in February. But I've done this so much over the years that I really don't have that many things every year in February. I do have a few things. I have 2 sweaters that I was knitting last spring and summer, and both of them had pretty big issues, and I put them away, and I'm gearing myself up to address them in February. They might not both get done in February, it just depends on how much work there is, but both of those will get addressed. So in previous years, I have done segments in Casual Friday every week in January, where I explained a different aspect about like how do you actually go through things, how do you make decisions, what can you do with things that you no longer want, what happens if you just have a lot of emotions relating to one of those items, all of those kinds of things. I will leave links down to those videos that really explain the whole process down in the show notes. Now, I've gotten so good in years past about completing things in February that I don't have this huge pile up anymore. And so often I also use February as Fix-It February. So maybe I have a sweater that I've been wearing for years, but the elbow's gotten worn out or the cuffs have gotten frayed, or something like that. Something needs to get repaired, or I need to put new buttons on it, or I need whatever. It's like, oh, this sweater would be so much better if only I fixed this one issue with it. And so a lot of times I use it for that. Some people use it to address things like stash, like their idea of finishing something in February is going through their stash and making things out of stash yarn so they can finish that yarn and get that out of their stash. So there are a lot of different ways that you can use it. It's really up to you. There are no real rules. They're just guidelines that might be able to help you. A lot of people, February is a bad time for them, or they just don't think I can devote a whole month to doing this kind of thing, or they have other kinds of deadlines. And so there are other ways that you can use this idea of Finish It February of regularly addressing UFOs, like using Fridays, Finish It Friday. Maybe on Fridays you pull something out and you work on it until that thing gets done. And then once that one is done, then you devote your Fridays to finishing something else in your pile. Or you can have something like a big 5 items that you rotate through every day or every 10 hours of knitting or whatever. And once one of those gets finished, then you can either start something new and put that into the rotation or bring another UFO into it. There are a lot of different ways to use this, and there have been a lot of ideas over the years for this. But I encourage you to join in on this if this is something that's of interest to you. This is probably the closest thing to a knit along that I ever do on my channel or in my Ravelry group. And I do have 2 threads that I start for Finish It February. One of them is just a general chat thread. You can tell people what you're working on, post pictures of all of the things that you're thinking about finishing. You can make progress updates, but it's a way to have sort of a knit along community. And then there's a second thread that's no chat, and that one, it gets opened up on February 1st, and that's for things that you've actually completed. And I will give more information about that as we get closer to February. But I hope you look forward to Finish It February the way I do, or if you're new to it, I hope that it sounds interesting and that it might be something that you'd like to join in on as well. So this is my latest finished object. This is a sweater called Drift by Norah Gaughan. She designed this when she was the director of design at Berroco Yarns back in the 2005 to 2014 range. This was designed in 2009. It's the feminized, cardiganized version of a men's pullover that was called Beagle that had been in my queue for about 10 years. When I decided, I was thinking about finally knitting it, but for myself, I was just like, I don't know if I can pull off the big shoulder holding an axe look in a sweater. I just wasn't sure. And as I was looking for something similar to that, I came across this and realized it was the same pattern, but it was perfect for me. So I always like Norah Gaughan's patterns. She does a lot of designing based on nature and like geometry and the way things fit together. I just really like her design sensibility, and she does a really good job with the design. They're just very good. I probably knit 4 different sweaters and tops that she's designed over the years. I made a couple of changes. One of the changes, probably the most noticeable change I made, was that the sleeves were originally designed to be completely stockinette. And what I did was I took this moss stitch pattern right here and I put it up the middle of the sleeve here. That was something I'd seen a couple other people do when I searched on most helpful projects using the advanced search of projects on Ravelry. I really liked that idea. I made a few little changes to what some people had done. Like I didn't put ribbing. Well, I have ribbing on the back, but some people did ribbing all the way around and then switched to the pattern, and I just started the pattern at the hem the way it had been started on the body. Another thing I changed was, I think the sizing is in 4-inch increments or 20 centimeter increments, and it would have had no ease if I'd done one size, but then I would have had 4 inches of ease if I'd gone to the next size. And with a cardigan, I usually don't want to have no ease because the buttons, things could pull a little bit. So I wanted something in the middle. The gauge for this is 20 stitches over 4 inches or 10 centimeters, or 5 stitches per inch. I need an extra 2 inches, that's 10 stitches. That's really hard to divide up on something like this. So I did 4 for the back, 2 at each edge, and then 2 on each of the 2 fronts. And where I did it was on the side here where there's this stockinette coming up at the seam right here. I just put a couple extra stitches. I chose the smaller of the 2 sizes that I was splitting to do my armhole depth and sleeve cap measurement, because I just looked at the size of the sleeve and felt that was the size I wanted. So I just made the body slightly wider than that smaller size because I just didn't want as much ease as going up to the next size would be. One of the other things I changed was buttonholes. So let me go to the overhead and I can kind of show you how I approached doing the buttonholes for this particular sweater. So the way these button bands were done is the button band was knit first, and it was knit from the center of the back. So stitches were picked up along the half of the neck all the way down the front. And then once that was done, then you could kind of figure out where to place the buttonholes, and then you would pick up for the buttonhole side. So you could figure this out ahead of time if you wanted to and do something all the way around. But the way that she designed this was to do it half and half and then seam the back of the neck, which worked out fine. Now, what the pattern said was to buy 1-inch buttons. And so you can see, kind of how big that is on this button band. And then the instructions said to do a yarn over buttonhole. So the way you do something like that is you're knitting along, and then you either do a yarn over and then a knit two together, or you do the knit two together and then a yarn over, and then you continue on. This is knit two, purl two ribbing. My preference is to place a yarn over buttonhole, like if it's a single yarn over, to use that in something that's knit one, purl one, and then to place that in the purl column. This is knit two, purl two, so my preference would be to place it like I have here again in the purl column, but have it be a double yarn over. So the way something like this works, and I have videos for this, I'll link up there if I remember, but I'll link down below, is that as you're coming up to it and you're working this knit stitch, you knit the first one, and then the second one you would do an SSK. So you'd have, this would be the purl stitch here, and this is the knit stitch. You do an SSK so that the purl stitch disappears and then the knit stitch ends up on top. You do a double yarn over, and then on this side you do a knit two together, which gets rid of this purl stitch and puts this knit stitch on top. And so then on the next row, when you get to this double yarn over, you're going to be seeing knit stitches over here, and you knit through the front of one of those loops and then through the back of the other, and which are purl bumps on this side. So this is the ideal way for me to do a double yarn over buttonhole. The problem was that with this V-neck, you need one here at the top where it's at this garter stitch transition, and then the last one is down here, maybe an inch from the bottom. And they wanted 6 buttons. Of course, you could have done 5 or 7. The further apart you spread them out, the more likely something is going to be gaping. But the narrower they are, went something this size, and they kind of look a little crowded. So, you know, you have to think things through. And I typically do like an odd number of buttons. This one called for an even number, and I felt like they were spaced out. When they're evenly spaced out, looked good. What I ended up doing is not my favorite thing, but I kind of looked at all my options and I decided that's what I was going to do. In order to space them out, sometimes the double yarn over had to be in the middle of 2 knit stitches. Sometimes it was in 2 purl stitches. Sometimes it was in a knit and a purl, or a purl and a knit, just based on that. So there are a couple of ways to get around that if what you really want is for everything to be in the purl ditches. And one way to do that, especially with an even number of buttons, would be to do this in pairs so that you have 2 buttons that are both in purl columns that are a certain number of ridges away from each other, and then do the same thing for 2 others, so that the distance between these 2 and these 2, like there might be more or less, probably more distance between those 2 than there are between the pair themselves. So I considered that. I thought about that, and then I thought about the fact that most of the time I don't unbutton my cardigans. I like cardigans. I like buttons on cardigans. I'm not interested in not doing the buttonholes and just sewing them shut, because who knows, maybe I do want to unbutton it at some point. It's like jewelry for the sweater, and I like that. But I rarely need to unbutton them because I don't get too hot. I live in Minnesota. My office can get really cold. I never am taking my sweater off in my office unless, like today, this is the sweater I was wearing, and now I need to show you on camera what it looks like. So because of that, I thought the buttons are always going to be completely covering the buttonholes, and I don't need to worry so much about that. Now, the other thing that I did before I decided to do a double yarn over, because the pattern called for a single yarn over, I didn't think that was going to be big enough. I already had the buttons. So I did a swatch, and I did a yarn over buttonhole, and then I did another double yarn over buttonhole to see if the single yarn over is going to be big enough, and it was not. And when I looked at the pattern photo, it was very clear they didn't use a single yarn over. They didn't use a yarn over buttonhole at all, as far as I could tell. They bound off for probably 3 stitches and then cast on the next row. So they used it like a standard type of bind off cast on buttonhole. They did not use any sort of yarn over buttonhole. So you are not beholden to the pattern. You can do things that you want your way. I decided I did want 6 buttons. I did want them evenly spaced, and that I would place them in kind of non-standard placements in order to get that evenness. And I was not concerned about what it would look like when the cardigan was unbuttoned, because I'm not going to be unbuttoning the cardigan. I wanted to give you an update on a shawl I started knitting a couple of weeks ago. It's for the Loose Ends project. Loose Ends is a volunteer organization. It just started a couple of years ago, or maybe very early 2023. And the idea was that a lot of people who are crafting, when they die, they leave unfinished projects behind. And sometimes crafters are working on things when they become ill or disabled in some way and are no longer able to complete those items. And so what Loose Ends does is they match up a crafter who understands that skill and has the appropriate skill level and is in the same geographical area. So that's what they're looking at. They're looking at geography and craft skill level, and in order to match people up so that they can meet in person and do the exchange rather than having to ship things, although they will in some cases if that's necessary. In my case, the knitter lives 2 blocks away from me. So we got to meet. She can still knit, but she is was not able to work on this particular project, which is like the one thing she was knitting for herself. It just was too complicated for her to follow the pattern. And it's called the Wingspan shawl. I'll put a picture on the screen. This is where I am right now. I am just at the point where I'm getting ready to do the bind off. So these are feathers, and the bind off is to shape each of these sections with short rows and do a bind off so you have the wing tips. And I could tell as I was knitting this that I was going to run out of yarn right when I needed to start doing those wing tips. There is a private group for Loose Ends finishers. There's a public group for just the Loose Ends project. And I was thinking about dyeing yarn that I had that had the right fiber content, had some of the sparkle in it. And I was trying to figure out how to do it, and somebody in that group hooked me up with the original dyer, the blue brick, and she is going to dye the final color that is in this gradient. She's going to dye enough of that for me to finish the shawl. So I am in the queue. I've been told I'm in the queue. She's in Canada, and so the Canadian postal strike is over now. I don't know when the yarn is going to come, so the project is on hold for right now until I get it, because I have gotten most of the way through. So I think the shawl is 90% finished at this point based on my spreadsheet and a spreadsheet I found online. But I thought I'd let you know. And so if any of you are interested in becoming a Loose Ends finisher, I will leave a link to their website below. Or, I mean, obviously if you're watching me, you're a crafter of some point, but you may have inherited items that require skills that you don't have. You might be a knitter and have your grandma's unfinished quilt, and it's not something that you know how to do. You could apply to them to see if there's somebody who can finish it for you. They have 23,000 people all over the world who are in their database as finishers, and they usually, I think they've got about 1,500 projects right now that are out with finishers. So they have plenty of people out there. If you're feeling like, oh, there's probably somebody more deserving than me, there probably isn't. You're just as deserving. They won't finish your unfinished projects. That's what Finish It February is for. But they will finish something else that you might not be able to. I have been volunteering at Gale Woods Farm since earlier this fall. For a while, I was a short-term volunteer, and then I got through the application process. There's a background check, and they have to check references and all this kind of stuff. So now I'm an official volunteer there. Gale Woods Farm is a working farm. It was left to the park system in our county, Three Rivers Parks, under the condition that it continued to be run as a farm, a working farm, and to be used for educational purposes. So they have all these educational programs. There's events going on all the time. People can take classes. They have a farm store where they sell eggs and produce and other things that are grown on the farm. They have cows and sheep and pigs and chickens. I don't know what else they have, but I know they have those. But I was really excited to hear that they had sheep, and specifically that they had Finnsheep. So a couple of years ago, when I was trying to motivate myself to spin more and learn more about spinning, I really was wanting to just understand more about different sheep breeds and how yarn is constructed. I got this kit of 30 different breeds. It was 1 ounce of comb top for each of these breeds. And I spun them up, then I knit them into squares, and I made this breed study blanket. So some of the wools are natural colors, and some of them were different shades of cream. I think I used the lightest shades of cream at the top, and then they got yellower as they went down. The bottom row is all long wools, so they have very different textures than the other ones. So it's really interesting, but one of the ones I really liked was Finn. And that's this one right here, this natural colored one. Well, Finn come in all different colors, and they're very prolific. Sheep, they might have, it's very common for them to have 3 or 4 babies. And I have been looking for more Finn to work with since I did this breed study blanket. So I'll go to a fiber festival and I'll kind of look for Finn, and I won't find it, and maybe I'll find something else, and I don't want to buy too much stuff. So, once I find something, then I stop looking. So I heard that they do Finn. And so I was really interested in getting involved in volunteering on the farm, specifically as a fiber volunteer. So they have a number of different things that they do, but they have these sheep. They shear them twice a year. They scour the wool, they dye the fleece, and then they have been sending it off to a local mill about an hour south of us to process into roving or bats or other kinds of things. And then they use those different colored rovings to create kits for the educational classes, or as kits that you could buy to just take home, that are sold in the shop, or they do all kinds of, the volunteers do a lot of wet felting of different kinds of things that are also sold in the shop. What I was really interested in was being able to be involved in the processing of the wool and do like scouring on a larger scale basis, or learning more about dyeing, and not have to figure it all out on my own at home. And then, just being able to experiment and get it figured out, and just learn so much more, and then take what I've learned there and bring it home into my own work. I found out that, they have all these sheep, and I asked, they said there was going to be a shearing event. This is like a month or so ago. They were going to need help with, the skirting of the fleeces as they came off. And that's something I wanted to learn more about. I kind of have learned about it and I've seen it, but I've never done it like right when it's come off the sheep. It's, been things like, here's something that's been stuffed in a bag, for a while, and then trying to go through and figure it out at that point. So I was really interested in doing it and having other people who were more experienced be there as well, and so I could learn more about it. And I said, well, do you ever sell any of the fleeces? And she said, well, I don't advertise it because I don't want to do a lot of it. We can't sell a lot of it. We can sell some of it. So she said, I'd be willing to sell like a pound of it. And she's like, if you come and volunteer and for the skirting, then I can, sell you some. I said, sure. And it was really fun. I had a really good time. Learned a lot. And then a couple of weeks later, when I was there volunteering, I asked her, I said, I'm still interested in getting some of that fleece. So she took me upstairs in the attic of the barn where they had them stored. We were going through them. She's like, well, what color do you want? Because they had all these different colors. And I thought, well, I've got some gray right now, and I've got some black, a black lamb fleece. And so maybe white, because then I could do some dyeing experiments with it. So we found a lamb fleece, and the bag said it weighed 3 pounds. And I remembered she told me I could have a pound of it. So we took it downstairs to where the shop was, and I saw there was a scale there. So I thought, oh, we're going to weigh it. And she was just telling the person working the cash register how to ring it up. And then it was $15 a pound, and so it was going to be 45 pounds, and was that okay? And I said, oh, you're going to sell me all of it? I thought I was only going to get a pound. She goes, yeah, I can sell you a pound, sell you the whole thing. And I was like, oh, sure. So I brought this fleece home, and last weekend I scoured it. And at first, when it was done being scoured and I laid it out to dry, just the color of it, I thought, it almost doesn't look like it got in clean. I mean, I saw the dirty water coming off of it, but it doesn't seem like it's that clean. I wonder what I did wrong. And then as it dried over the next day or two, it got lighter. And it still was a little bit darker than what I was expecting. I don't know if you can see. Here's kind of what it is. And so I looked up here it is, my fleece and fiber source book. I was looking up the Finnsheep in there. And one of the things that they said, well, they come in all colors, including white. The white tends to be a warmer tone, kind of a white. And I thought, oh, okay, that's what's going on here. Because if I look at my breed study, I did the lighter colors at the top, and then they got yellower toward the bottom. That's a really good way of describing it. It's a warmer cream color. So my plan is that because I've been doing some dyeing of yarn, experimenting, and those experiments have been working out pretty well for me. Seeing what that they're doing at Gale Woods, where they're dyeing their fleece and then they would send it to a mill, I thought, well, I'm going to try dyeing some fleece and then carding it here on my drum carder, and maybe even doing some experiments where I'm blending colors. So dyeing a couple of different colors and then blending things together and seeing how all of that works out. And doing it in experiments of like 100 grams at a time or something like that. So I'm really excited. I'm going to Gale Woods tomorrow. There's an extra volunteer session, and we're going to be starting to scour the fleeces that were shorn at the shearing event a month or so ago. So I'm really excited to use kind of this bigger scouring setup than what I have at home, and see if maybe I can get any tips that they do differently there than what I do at home. So this will be fun. I'm really excited for my Finn fleece and seeing what it becomes. One thing that I want to mention, this is the last Casual Friday of 2024. So in 2 weeks, you'll see another one. So normally, what I've been doing since the fall of 2023 is alternating a Casual Friday with a Technique Tuesday. So 1 week I'll do one week I'll do the other. In January, we are going on a road trip for a week, and then the week after we get back, I am going to be down at Get Bent's farm. I've been doing this Year with the Sheep at Get Bents, where after the lambs were born, we helped with the ear tagging. We've been seeing how the farm changes during the different seasons. I had a shearing in September that I couldn't go to, but I was able to later pick out a lamb fleece, and I have scoured that. It's black. And then the next thing is, do we want to have that processed in some way? And I have plenty of fleeces at home, especially with this Finn fleece now. What I was really interested is in watching the fleece go through the process of becoming yarn. This week after we get back from our road trip, I'm going to be driving down to Get Bents every day for I don't know how many days in a row. She will have done all of the picking to kind of break up the fleeces a little bit, but she's keeping them in order so we know which fleece is which. She's starting with the lighter ones the week that we're out of town and then gradually getting darker. And so mine is going to be at the end because it's very black. So it will be picked, and then I'll get to see it getting carded and help with that, and then see it get turned into the roving, and then the machinery will get switched around, and so that it can then be used to spin. And then after it's spun, she switches it, and then it can do the plying. So that's why it's going to take multiple days. So because of that, there's going to be 1 week in January where I will have no video. So I'll have a Casual Friday video, and then there will be no video at all the next week. And then the following week, there will be a Technique Tuesday, and then the next week, a Casual Friday. So just giving you the heads up that that's what's happening in January. There just isn't going to be time for me to be recording and editing while I'm physically not in my home. So just thought I'd give you a heads up. Hope you have a wonderful new year, and that you have all good things coming to you in your knitting life for 2025. Well, that's it for Season 7 of the Casual Friday podcast. I will be back next year for Season 8, and I hope to see you there. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next year.